again, I'm labouring the point, but there's a lot going in lots of different directions. One of the subject matters which I love, because again, it's addressing one of the key conversations that you hear about and have heard as a narrative since 2017, and before. This thing doesn't scale. Nothing scales. It's too slow. Doesn't scale. You add that to the job lot that is. It's the dark web. It's criminals. You go. That's pretty much the answer that most people give you. It doesn't scale. It's too expensive. It's being built. Everything's being built. The problem with the point-in-time assessment of this ecosystem, which is what most people do, is when I looked at it, it didn't do this thing. You go, look again. And that's sort of the challenge that we're putting out to everybody. It's look again. This particular subject matter, I'm going to introduce David Raper onto the stage to moderate from here. A conversation that's happening far afield is about scaling and securing these networks. And this is the critical bit for me. This is the amplification. This is the growth of this ecosystem. It's the ability to make sure that we've got very, very firm foundations on the layer one environments, and then we can build product on top of it. So this is the future of the subject matter that we're looking at here, and it's the thing that we'll address once and for all. It's too slow, it's too expensive and the like. So we can kill that narrative too, and hopefully, given we started to try to kill some of these narratives yesterday, we can kill them all one by one, and then we can just point back to these moments in time and say, no, it's scaling, you just haven't been paying attention. David has a unique background. We had a chat recently about the work that he's doing, and unusually brings together traditional finance, probably best described, David. It's an interesting thing that you've done. You're working with some great businesses now, and credit to you for jumping in hands and feet first into this space. So I'll welcome you onto the stage. Fellas, have we got the other two people online? Yeah, we're good. David, welcome you onto the stage to host this panel.
Thanks very much, Steve. Afternoon, everybody. If the introduction wasn't the giveaway, the photo definitely was. Coming very much out of TradFi, about time I got a new photo. We're going to talk about transactional layers here, scaling, security. For the last 10 years, I've been responsible for the transactional layer, the platform that is the Australian stock market and the Australian futures market, and how we build products on that, how we scale it, and importantly, how we secure it. When you think about exchanges in the traditional sense, almost their core value proposition is trust. And trust means that they're there, that your assets are going to be there, and that there isn't corruption. Right at the top of every board's risk list, everything that they're most concerned about goes to cybersecurity and asset security. Interesting, in the Bankless podcast this morning, they spoke about the outage on ASX 24, the futures exchange. Most people in the room didn't know it happened. Kane Warwick didn't know it happened. And that's because most of you don't have access to that market. This is changing all of this. As Steve said, I've been in this area now for a few months, a long time in traditional finance. So thankfully, I'm being joined by a couple of people that do know what they're talking about in this space. I'm being joined by Ray. Ray is in Berlin at the moment. He's a co-founder of TracerDAO. And I've got Stephen as well, who is a co-founder and CEO of Offchain Labs and Arbitrum. So I'd like to welcome these two gentlemen to our presentation today. So maybe I'll kick off with Ray. Ray, I've spoken about security being a very important thing for a traditional platform, a traditional transaction layer. What does security mean for you when you're building on Ethereum and building on Arbitrum?
Yeah, I guess the way we sort of think about security when we're looking to build is there's basically what we call like the trilemma when thinking about blockchains. So there's decentralization, there's security, and then there's scalability. So security is pretty much at the heart of everything we're looking to do and build. For us, it's probably the biggest consideration, but I know different people have sort of different views and different choices in the trade-off. Yeah, that's kind of how we think about tackling it. So we're looking to build on top of systems that usually provide really good security, really good decentralization, and then scalability is what's sort of coming over time. we sort of started off focusing purely on the ETH mainnet because we liked the security there, we liked the trust assumptions, and then obviously Arbitrum is where we're deployed now. And a lot of the reasoning there is purely security focused, and then the decentralization and scalability aspect.
Stephen, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think that really encapsulates, what the importance of security, and that's really everything that we're trying to do, which is give the reason why people are launching on Ethereum is because of the security of Ethereum is unparalleled. And our question, coming into this was, hey, can we, preserve that security of Ethereum, but also offer scalability? And that's really the core value proposition of what we're doing. And for apps like Tracer, and it's really, really core to our mission.
Stephen, do you have a view? I spoke about security from a traditional finance perspective. Do you have a view on where Ethereum is taking that security? Is it stepped forward?
Absolutely. Ethereum, in my opinion, absolutely. Ethereum is the most secure blockchain. And in blockchain, we often talk about the word is trust. We want to minimize trust. And when you compare the existing systems to blockchain systems, the power they have is very, very strong, because you don't have to trust counterparties. You can build systems that are transparent, and you can see what's happening. And if you believe in some fundamental principles that the blockchain just operates and the code just does what it's supposed to, which is pretty well secured, particularly in Ethereum, then what's happening, and there aren't sort of backroom actors who can do things that are wrong. But often it's a little more nuanced than that. It's not always about like, Ethereum is trustless, but in a centralized model, you have to worry about it. Often in a centralized model, you do have trust, but there's a real cost to that trust, right? You have cost of getting and building these massive institutions. So even when it works, there's a real cost to that. And one of the most amazing things about this space is the pace of innovation. The fact that you don't have to go on this multi-year building up these massive institutions to get this trust. Instead, you can have anonymous teams often just launching financial apps and securing money, and you can look at their code and automatically get that trust. So yes, it's doing things for security and increasing trust and allowing you to do things without trusting someone. But even in cases where you're pretty sure that you can trust the counterparty, the cost of getting that trust is just really, really lowered. And it opens up the bar for great new applications and great new actors that can immediately offer products to users.
Yes, Stephen, you've absolutely got me there on the pace of innovation. After 10 years in TradFi and 6 months in this space, there is no parallel. One of the first things that was mentioned to me when I started moving into this space was, hey, gas charges are really high, it doesn't scale. How are you going to try and think about the businesses that you've been involved in prospering and being able to use this technology? Maybe, Ray, you've tried to address that issue. You've been looking at layer twos. Can you give us a little bit of background on that?
Yeah, I guess I can kind of walk you through how we ended up with the Arbitrum choice, because it's a bit of a story of coincidence in the end. But essentially what we were building at the start was quite computationally heavy. And as a lot of people know, you have to pay for computation on Ethereum. So we sort of ended up at a point where to run the systems we wanted to build, it was pretty much going to be infeasible, right? Like it was going to cost us so much that we wouldn't have been able to bootstrap it. We wouldn't have been able to get the system actually running and get people into using it. So as soon as we realized that, we were basically in the position of, okay, we have to pick an L2 that still sort of suits our ethos. Like it still needs to be decentralized enough. It still needs to be secure enough, but it needs to be cheaper. So we got to that point, and then it was basically Arbitrum versus Optimism was where we sort of got to. And I don't know if many people remember that time, but Optimism was really probably in the public eye a lot more than Arbitrum, I would say. And so we were sort of tossing that up, going back and forth. We talked to both of the teams. Their mechanisms are both very similar. I'm sure, Stephen, you'll have thoughts on how they actually differ in detail. But from like a builder perspective, the selling points were very similar. And then ultimately it just came down to timing, to be honest. Like was mentioned before, the pace of innovation is so quick that we couldn't really afford to to wait for anyone, and Arbitrum just delivered on what they said they would deliver, and it's worked great for us. So yeah, that's sort of how we ended up with our decision. And it's definitely meant that the product we're building now is actually accessible by users. Like, they can use it. The maintenance cost is quite cheap, and that's purely because gas on Arbitrum is quite a bit cheaper.
So Stephen, I imagine that's music to your ears in terms of what you've been building. How have you thought about those problems?
Yeah, so we think along the same lines, of course, which is our main goal is our number one goal is to deliver a secure experience, but we already have Ethereum, which is a secure experience. So our real number one goal is to deliver a much better user experience. And a big part of that is cost. And also part of that is speed of transactions. You get instant confirmations and don't have to wait. Those are those are our two sort of guiding technical principles. How can we, without sacrificing on security, get costs much lower and just overall improve the user experience. And when I think about to the point of how Arbitrum, why one should I'll take the other side of that, why one should choose Arbitrum. So number one is, of course, the security. And security is often a hard thing to sell, because someone says, well, you say, you're more secure than them, but they're not broken. And so it's sort of, you're selling against these black swan events, which we all hope don't happen. But so it's a bit hard to sell. But often it's what we're seeing today is it's one place is like people want to put their liquidity, people want to put money on a system they're confident in. So you'll have like NFT collectors that are only really comfortable buying on certain platforms. We have thankfully a big NFT marketplace and really ecosystem in Arbitrum, and it's due to the fact of the comfort that people get with the security. So it's becoming easier to sell, but it really often is one of the harder things to sell to people. But the things that we differ, because there are many really great teams building layer twos on Ethereum. Number one, we're the only ones today that have a general platform with all the security features built out, and like the proofs that secure our network actually built out and running in production. The other thing that we did, I think, differently when we launched, where we were trying very much to be open and fair and do a fair launch to everyone. And what that meant is, we weren't looking and saying, oh, this is an established project, this is a non-established project, and you can go first and you can go second. Instead, we said, hey, everyone gets to launch Arbitrum the same day. And the way we did that was in May of last year, almost a year ago, we went ahead and we opened up shop to developers first. There was a 3-month period which only any developer who wanted access could get access, but no users could. And then on day one, which came in August, everyone opened up at the same time. So you had, for example, Uniswap and SushiSwap went live on the same day. Another exchange called Swapper went live on the same day as well, which wasn't a big player on layer one, but we sort of, were fair, and it is important to us to be fair and inclusive to everyone. And the last one, I would say, which differs from us, it's you sort of want to be where the adoption is. And we've been very fortunate to build with really, really excellent teams like Tracer. We have hundreds of teams on our platform today, and the power of DeFi, despite the ease of the ease of entry, the other really big powerful thing here is that you can use it as a building block, right? So you can go ahead and create experiences, create apps that tap into other apps, that tap into, just build and build and build on top like Lego. And so having an adopted ecosystem with many projects and lots of liquidity is really, really important. And Arbitrum today has over $3 billion on the platform already and growing, and hundreds of live apps.
I think with my experience, I see that users will come onto a platform, particularly retail users, and they will trust that platform inherently. But when you want to scale to larger investors and larger users of that platform, that they will undertake their own analysis, as the previous panel was speaking about. And at that point, security does become a really big differentiator. Again, as a sort of a newbie in this space, I start hearing about ETH2 and the merge process, and the previous panel did a really good job in explaining what's happening. But from my perspective, I look at that and I'll think, okay, do I still need a layer 2 when the ETH2 comes, the merge comes? Is that a valid concern, or am I missing the point on that?
So these two things actually complement each other and work very well together. And obviously, I want to think that, but that's not really my view. That's really the ecosystem's view in general. I think the best resource on this is Vitalik Buterin. About a year and a half ago, put out a post, and the title of the post was ETH2's roll-up centric roadmap. So our roll-up centric roadmap for ETH2. And so what that means is the core of the ETH2 visions are these rollups, and rollup is a technical term, and Arbitrum is a rollup. It's just a category of scaling solutions that inherit their security from Ethereum. And so in my view, but also in the broader Ethereum ecosystem, Vitalik Buterin's view, rollups like Arbitrum are core to the ETH2 story. So what does that mean? Why does that happen? The main thing that ETH2 will provide for rollups, it will lower our cost of putting data on Ethereum. Our main cost today, so we mentioned that Arbitrum transactions are much lower than Ethereum. They're about 90 to 95% lower today, depending on what you're doing. But the main cost, the remaining 5 to 10%, most of that is paid for putting data on Ethereum. Not all of it, but a significant portion of it. And when you lower the data cost significantly, the cost to users goes down significantly as well. So we welcome ETH2. We're excited for ETH2, and it's going to ultimately make a better rollup experience because we'll lower our costs. And when you lower our costs, that means we can be more inclusive, and apps and users that were previously priced out can now launch on Arbitrum and build new experiences. So they really, really go hand in hand together. And the way to think about it in one sentence is ETH2 will lower data costs, Arbitrum will lower execution costs.
Great. Is there anything you want to add to that, Ray?
The only thing I'd add, I guess, is some of the older like ETH2 documentation sort of hints at this, synergy between L2s and ETH2 anyway, back when we were talking about sharding and that whole universe. But yeah, I think Stephen's answer is pretty spot on. It's going to make it cheaper for everyone, and ultimately should lead to a better experience.
I'd like to change your gears for a moment, Ray. Tracer DAO, I'm actually a user. I've traded into those perpetual pools. And the way that it's presented is as a protocol, derivative protocol factory. So an open source available to anyone to create a contract. Why have you taken that approach rather than approach of an exchange?
Yeah, I guess one of the big pieces for us is that one of the real big powers in DeFi is the composability piece. The fact that everyone can build on top of each other and all the pieces sort of slot together. You can take tokens from one platform, use them in another. If we went for sort of an exchange model, what ends up happening is you sort of have this siloed ecosystem. You can have all your liquidity in one place, but you can't really take it anywhere and do anything. It kind of takes away the power of DeFi in that people can come to Tracer and build on top of what we're doing or use what we're doing in whatever way they see fit. So some of the examples we like to use of this are like, if you're a community and you want to manage your risk using derivatives, you don't have to go through a centralized platform and go through all that hassle. You can just use a decentralized version. And it might not even be that you just want to use derivatives, but you might have a very specific niche use case, right? Like you need to hedge fuel in Sydney, and you need to settle the markets in your governance token for whatever reason. If we give these people the building blocks, they can do that rather than having to wait for a single entity to sort of innovate, create markets and control the markets. We just believe that if everyone can access and use these tools, you end up with a much better ecosystem. So that's like the main reasoning for not going the sort of exchange model. Composability is key in DeFi. And I mean, we even see it with layer twos, right? That's composability at play. So I think that's probably one of the biggest selling points of DeFi, and we're super keen to lean into that.
I think you made a great point there, Ray, about opening up these markets as well. And the point I made right at the beginning that the major futures exchange in Australia was down and really no one knew because they don't have access. They're denied access to it today. I think what you guys are doing is really opening that up. And there's this term of democratization of finance, but it really is opening up products and capabilities that have really been denied to a lot of people before. Steve, do you have any views on that as well?
Yeah, I think it's a very similar really thing that we think about as well, which is, as much people sometimes say to me, hey, why don't you build this on Arbitrum? And our answer is, we want to give people the tools to innovate, right? So we are build a platform. We know what we have to optimize. We have to continue to lower our fees and get them down as low as we can without compromising on security, and continue to make sure the user experience is better. But ultimately, we want to put the hands in users, because there are a lot of people there that are a lot smarter than me with ideas of how to build building blocks together. So when you just put tools out there rather than lock yourself into one, specific use case, and I think it's very similar to what Ray was saying about Tracer. It's obviously it's on Arbitrum, so it's one level up, but it's still you can think of it almost as a platform, a tool set for users to build experiences with that and build what you might not guess that users will need these exact combination, but you give them the tools and the building blocks and they'll build what they need. And ultimately, you don't have to take a guess. You don't have to say, well, I think this will be exactly what users want. And then it turns out that you're wrong and no one wants that. It's like, hey, you build what you want. And that's really the beautiful part about the blockchain and composability is you can put out these tools and people can pick them up and combine them in ways that you really never imagined yourself.
I also think like this mindset is actually what enables DeFi and like crypto itself to move so fast, right? Like most people in the space aren't trying to control everything. Instead, most of us are just building these open source ecosystems and tools and letting everyone build on top of it. And I think that's the main reason we can move so fast, right? You're building on the shoulders of everyone else, and that's pretty powerful.
A lot of the conversations I hear are DeFi against TradFi, or almost like different tribes, different parties. And the people that I know in TradFi, they fall in really one of three camps. They either don't know anything about DeFi, two, they see the opportunity and they want to get involved and they see how it can improve things. But probably the biggest group of people are the ones that are scared and defensive at the moment. DeFi is coming to eat our lunch. DeFi is coming to ruin my business. How would you go about trying to win over those sort of people?
Yeah, I sort of think in some ways a bit of that fear is good to push innovation, right? Like it's forcing people to think about redesigning these systems, which I think is ultimately positive, but I don't think it's going to be zero sum. I don't think that TradFi is just going to disappear and DeFi is going to take over. I think there's so much room for this traditional financial system, which has all these great things, to integrate with this base layer technology that we're all building, integrate with the layer twos, integrate with different protocols. And what that ends up looking like, it can go so many different ways, but I think it depends on how willing people are to sort of experiment, and not experiment in just build like on a private ledger and build a lending application and see how it goes, but really actually embrace the ecosystem and see how it's working. Again, like it's all open, it's all composable. No one in DeFi is trying to stop integrations or stop people joining. In fact, like most teams like us, and I'm sure Arbitrum are actively talking and reaching out to these institutions. So yeah, in my opinion, that's the best way forward. Like be open to attempting to see where this combined system leads, and hopefully it leads to a better financial system.
How are you seeing that, Stephen? Are you having those conversations with more traditional companies?
Absolutely. And something which Ray said in passing, I'll just focus on, which is, it used to be this, what Ray described as like these private networks. Like in 2017, when TradFi says, oh, we want to build a blockchain, what it often meant was they'll take something, someone will sell them some software that they call blockchain, and they'll, do something with their internal systems. Increasingly today, and I still think we're early, but we're seeing more and more of this, real traditional finance and really traditional companies in many sectors, tech companies, are all thinking about how do we build on the public blockchain. So not like how do we use blockchain technology internally in an opaque way in our systems, but how do we bridge to Ethereum? I don't think it's not a zero sum. And I don't think one's better or, all around than the other. I think there is really many opportunities for them to work together. For example, DeFi has this openness and this innovation that's amazing, and its composability. But traditional finance, there are definitely certain efficiencies that you have by having certain things centralized. And there are certain opportunities that are only available And how do we bring those to DeFi users is really, really a question. How do you merge these? And again, it's all about composability. So how do we bring these into the same tool set so you can build using the amazing DeFi apps like Tracer, but you can also build an experience that incorporates traditional finance in that as well. And I think today I would be surprised if there's any large or major financial institution that doesn't have someone or even some team thinking about these questions. And we're fortunate to be having many of these conversations. But it's definitely exciting to see this happening, and every day more and more you hear one more company comes over the line and is doing something in DeFi, and I think you'll see more of that to come.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think once you see people starting to break across, you're going to see a rush because they're going to have that FOMO experience. They're going to be concerned that their competitors are getting in front of them. Now, I think I'm getting the wrap up here, but thank you, both of you. I'm not quite sure what time it is in Berlin or the US, but thanks very much for making some time for us today, sharing your insights. It's much appreciated on this end. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, David.